Seriously, what is the point of Cait Sith? In this video I'm going to share my thoughts with you about why Cait Sith seems like such a redundant character in the context of Final Fantasy VII, and one that doesn't bring anything interesting to the game as a whole. Now I appreciate that might sound a bit harsh. After all, Final Fantasy VII is one of the best games of all time, right? Therefore, how could there be any characters in it that aren't essential to the game's plot and development? Well, hear me out on this, and I'll try to put forward an argument that supports my initial view. And if by the end of this video you think I'm completely wrong, please feel free to hurl abuse at me in the comments. Also, before we get started, it would mean a lot to me if you could hit that red subscribe button down there and the notification bell next to it, so that you can keep updated with every new Final Fantasy video on this channel. Now I feel like I should say from the outset that I don't dislike every single thing about Cait Sith. The character has one of the best pieces of theme music in the game, and also one of the more interesting and unique limit breaks, one that's capable of killing both Ruby Weapon and Emerald Weapon in just one hit. Also, for the purposes of this video, I will be pronouncing the character's name as Cait Sith, but I am aware that other pronunciations are available and probably more accurate too. Now it's probably fair to say that my opinion of the character is that it doesn't add anything special to Final Fantasy VII. You could basically take Cait Sith out of the game completely and not lose anything of value. I know that you can of course make similar arguments for Yuffie Kisaragi and to a certain extent Vincent Valentine. I mean, they are by definition optional characters that you don't even need to encounter or have in your party in order to finish Final Fantasy VII. While you have no choice but to encounter Cait Sith in order to progress through the game. So that's that, right? Have I already shot down my own case and left it burning on the ground? Well, perhaps. But while Cait Sith is indeed a mandatory character, as opposed to Yuffie and Vincent, I can't help but see their histories and backstories as more interesting. I mean, it's only by learning about the relationship between Vincent and Lucretia that you, and I'm sorry if this is a spoiler for anyone who isn't aware of the Vincent, Lucretia, Hojo love triangle part of the story. Anyway, it's only by learning about the backstory of Vincent and Lucretia that you learn about the origins of Sephiroth and that Lucretia is his biological mother, as opposed to Cait Sith's story, which is that it's a cat riding a big toy Moogle. That's about as interesting as Cait Sith gets. What is quite interesting is the mythology of something called the Cait Sith, which was the inspiration for the character of Cait Sith in Final Fantasy VII, and other instances of Cait Sith throughout the Final Fantasy series. And no, we're not talking about this kind of Sith. In Celtic folklore, the Cait Sith is a creature resembling a large black cat with a white spot on its chest that haunts the Highlands of Scotland. Some tales also suggest that a Cait Sith is a witch that can turn into a cat 9 times. Upon the 9th transformation, the witch will stay as a cat for the rest of its life, and some believe this is where the idea of cats having 9 lives originates. Intriguingly, the people of the Scottish Highlands do not trust the Cait Sith, believing the creature has the ability to steal a person's soul. Maybe this notion of stealing someone's soul is the reason why Final Fantasy VII's Cait Sith rides around on the back of a toy Moogle, representing the idea of using something else as a vessel to do its bidding. There's also a clear connection between the Scottish folklore tales of the Cait Sith and Cait Sith having a Scottish accent in Dirge of Cerberus and Final Fantasy Advent Children. Legend also has it that on a Gaelic festival called Samhain, and I apologise because I probably said that wrong, the Cait Sith would bless houses that left a saucer of milk out for it to drink. While I'm not sure if there's an intended connection here or not, it just seems interesting that there could be a link between the saucer of milk left out for the Cait Sith and Fortune, and the famous gold saucer where Cait Sith awaits Cloud and the party in Final Fantasy VII. Anyway, back to the game. So why is it that I think Cait Sith adds nothing to Final Fantasy VII? Well, primarily because the character doesn't really do anything. It doesn't seem to have an interesting backstory that is alluded to or explored in detail, while I also don't find myself wondering what Cait Sith would have done in the years following the events of Final Fantasy VII. Unlike Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Red 13, Cid and Vincent, fully fleshed out characters with stories, emotions and motivations, Cait Sith is just kinda there. The character seems entirely dispensable. In fact, there is part of Final Fantasy VII in which Cait Sith is literally dispensed with, or at least the first version of Cait Sith is dispensed with. This of course is the part of the game spent in the complex and mysterious Temple of the Ancients, where your party learns about Sephiroth's out-of-this-world plan to summon a meteor, an actual goddamn meteor, to inflict immense damage on the planet, After doing the hard work and defeating Demon's Gate, which in my opinion is one of the most frustrating boss battles in the game, Cait Sith decides to pop in and steal the show. That's right, Cait Sith, this weird cat Moogle thing, which might or might not actually be alive or sentient, decides to sacrifice itself in order to help your party acquire the awesome black materia. This would have been a cool thing to do if it wasn't for the fact that Cloud immediately pawns it off to Sephiroth moments later. But hey, that's Cloud for you. Cait Sith number 1's final lines even contradict each other. First it says, "There's plenty of stuffed toys like my body around, but there's only one me." But that's followed immediately by, "Don't forget me even if another Cait Sith comes along," implying that there is more than one Cait Sith in existence. For all we know, there could be an infinite supply of Cait Siths waiting in the wings, ready to be wheeled out at any time. In fact, it's probably this part of the game that essentially sums up my overall problem with Cait Sith. In what should be the character's defining moment, the moment of ultimate, selfless sacrifice, whereby this noble creature gives up its own existence for the good of the planet, we're given no reason to mourn Cait Sith whatsoever because another version shows up moments later to take its place. A version which actually says, "I'm Cait Sith number 2. What? Any reason to care about the walking talking marshmallow sacrifice instantly evaporates as the character is immediately replaced. Now maybe you're wondering why that's a problem. Personally, the reason why it's a problem for me is because it removes any sense of loss or consequence. Take Aerith's death, for example. Aerith's sacrifice is the most iconic part of Final Fantasy VII and one of the most iconic moments in gaming history. Why? Not just because of the shocking way in which it happens, but also because of what it means in the context of the game. When it happens, you realise that Sephiroth is winning, and Aerith, this symbol of innocence and purity, has just been brutally murdered. It is a defining moment because it is a moment of severe loss. Do you think that moment would mean anywhere near as much, or be as iconic, if moments after defeating Jenova, Aerith number 2 popped by to join your party and take dead Aerith's place? The answer is, hell no. If anything, that would detract from the character and probably the game too. And that harks back to what I said earlier about my belief that Cait Sith basically adds nothing to the game, because none of the character's actions mean anything in the long run. Cait Sith steals the keystone, but you don't really need it anyway. Cait Sith dies, but doesn't really. And Cloud tells everyone to find a reason to fight, and Cait Sith becomes lifeless. The character has no clear motivation or reason to fight alongside your party. It's just there for the ride. That doesn't exactly strike me as a particularly interesting or compelling character in the context of such an amazing game, especially when compared to other characters and their reasons to fight against Shinra and Sephiroth. And so naturally here comes the part of the video where I contradict myself slightly. While I do have a problem with Cait Sith as a character, I don't have as much of a problem with Reeve 2SD as a character. This is despite the fact that Reeve apparently is Cait Sith, or rather is the one who's controlling Cait Sith. Somehow. Reeve strikes me as someone who has a more complex choice to make about which path he ultimately takes. When we meet him, he is part of Shinra, and therefore instantly labelled as a bad guy. However, we see him stand up to President Shinra, unlike his colleagues, about the destruction of Sector 7, and he effectively gets cold-shouldered for doing so. At times we're led to believe that he's spying on the party and acting against them in the interests of Shinra, while at other times he undermines his employer and stands up to his colleagues, both as Cait Sith and as himself. Therefore, I think it's fair to say that Reeve, even though he's not actually seen much in Final Fantasy VII as himself, comes across as a more compelling character than Cait Sith, and someone who's working out where his allegiances lie as the events of the game unfold. Anyway guys, here ends my reasoning for why I think Cait Sith is a largely redundant character. One who has little bearing on the events in Final Fantasy VII and could quite easily be removed completely without anyone caring that much. I think what the creators tried to do with the design of the character should be applauded, and the Scottish folklore of the Cait Sith itself, and the way the Final Fantasy series as a whole constantly touches upon elements of mythology, is fantastic. Also, the idea of having some kind of connection between Cait Sith and Reeve is another thought-provoking, if at times confusing, concept. But ultimately, I think it's fair to say that Cait Sith isn't the greatest character in the history of Final Fantasy. However, if you disagree with me, I'd be interested to find out why in the comments. What do you think Cait Sith brings to Final Fantasy VII? Why do you think Cait Sith is actually a more compelling character than I'm giving it credit for? Or which Final Fantasy VII characters do you think actually deserve more criticism than Cait Sith? Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe as well so that you get alerted whenever a new Final Fantasy video is posted. So until next time, thanks for watching.